On the night of June 5, 2003, Olivia Hartley vanished. She was 17 years old, last seen in a shimmering blue dress at the Fairhaven High School prom. Her parents waved goodbye from their porch. Her best friend took a blurry Polaroid in the car. Her classmates remembered her dancing, laughing, alive. By sunrise, Olivia was a missing person. The case captured national attention. For weeks, search parties scoured the woods behind the event center. Helicopters swept cornfields. Divers combed through ponds. Police questioned everyone, from classmates to local drifters, but nothing stuck. No body. No trace. No suspects. And then, just when the town of Fairhaven had begun to move on, a school yearbook was donated to the local library archive, nearly 2 decades later. That's when someone saw it. A figure. In the background. A face that shouldn't have been there. What they discovered would unearth secrets buried deeper than Olivia's disappearance, and change the way Fairhaven remembered its past forever. But before we dive into the details of the story, kindly drop in the comment section the location you are watching from, and push the subscription button for notification on captivating and interesting stories on Chase Narration. Now let's continue with the story. Prom night in Fairhaven was a big deal. It always had been. The entire town chipped in, parents volunteering, shopkeepers decorating store windows, the mayor even renting a vintage car to chauffeur the prom court. It was tradition. Olivia Hartley had been looking forward to it for months. She wasn't the type who usually stood out, quiet, bright, observant. But that night, in a flowing blue gown and soft curls pinned back with silver clips, she turned every head in the room. She arrived with Jamie Linwood, her best friend since kindergarten. They posed for photos by the Elks Lodge fountain, snuck into the kitchen to steal cupcakes before dinner, and danced to every slow song. Around 9:40 p.m., Jamie left the ballroom to use the restroom. When she returned, Olivia was gone. At first, no one panicked. Maybe she'd stepped outside. Maybe she needed air. But after 20 minutes of silence, Jamie grew uneasy. She called Olivia's phone. No answer. Security swept the building. Volunteers checked the parking lot. The DJ made a soft announcement asking Olivia to check in with the chaperones. By 11:15 p.m., her parents were called. By 12:04 a.m., she was officially missing. Fairhaven, Indiana wasn't the kind of place where people vanished. There were church potlucks. Friday night football. Quiet neighborhoods with white fences and porch swings. Olivia's disappearance wasn't just a tragedy, it was an earthquake. Within 24 hours, hundreds of people joined the search. Volunteers combed the woods. The National Guard set up a command post in the school gym. Yellow ribbons lined Main Street. Everyone had a theory. A jealous ex-boyfriend. A secret stalker. A runaway fantasy gone wrong. But none of it led anywhere. Her dress was found 2 days later, tattered and stained, in the woods behind the event center. One shoe. A broken bracelet. A cell phone with the screen shattered but battery still intact. Forensics found traces of blood, just enough to raise alarm, not enough to confirm the worst. With no witnesses, no solid leads, and no body, the case slowly fell cold. Fairhaven buried its grief quietly. Olivia's photo stayed taped to storefronts long after hope had faded. Her name was still spoken in church, in school, and in the letters Jamie wrote and never sent. By year 5, her face was mostly a memory. Until someone opened that yearbook. It started innocently. A retired librarian, Susan Greaves, was sorting through a box of donations when she spotted the 2003 Fairhaven High School yearbook. She smiled, it was the year Olivia vanished. Out of curiosity, she flipped to the prom section. She froze. There, on the edge of a photo showing Olivia and Jamie dancing, was a man. Older. Out of place. Not a chaperone. Not a student. A man in his late 30s, standing by the back wall. His posture was stiff. His eyes weren't on the dancers. They were on Olivia. Susan took the book to the police that same day. Detective Marla Jennings, now retired but once the lead investigator on Olivia's case, was called in as a consultant. She stared at the photo for a long time before speaking. "He wasn't on the guest list," she said. Cross-referencing old Prom security logs revealed no ID badge scan for anyone matching the man's face. The school's chaperone list came up empty. Facial recognition software finally gave the man a name. Walter Drexler. He was a part-time maintenance contractor hired by the Elks Lodge in early 2003. He had worked 3 events before prom night and was let go shortly after for failing to pass a background check. No one had thought to question him back then, because no one remembered him being there. Until now. When police visited his last known address, they found the house long vacated. But something else was waiting for them. In the crawlspace beneath the house was a box. Inside, newspaper clippings about Olivia's disappearance. A necklace identical to one she had worn to prom. And photographs, grainy, time-stamped, of Olivia taken from a distance. Weeks, possibly months, before she vanished. He hadn't just seen her at prom. He had been watching her long before. 3 weeks after the rediscovery of the yearbook photo and the search of Walter Drexler's old house, Olivia's mother, Elaine Hartley, received a letter in the mail. There was no return address. The envelope was thin, the handwriting shaky and unfamiliar. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper. At the top, scribbled in smudged ink, were 6 words. "I'm not dead. I never was." Elaine dropped the letter. At first, she thought it had to be a cruel prank. But then she noticed something only she would recognize. A doodle in the corner of the page. A flower with 5 petals, shaded the exact way Olivia had always drawn them in her school notebooks. She turned the page over. More writing. "He took me before the last dance. I didn't get to say goodbye. But I never stopped trying to get back." Police took the letter and examined it. Forensics detected partial fingerprints, too smudged to confirm identity, but enough to warrant a deeper look. Then another letter arrived. This time with a postmark from a town 60 miles away. Same handwriting. Same paper. Same flower doodle. "I don't know what day it is. But I saw my dress on the news. Tell Jamie I'm sorry I left." By the time a third letter arrived, Olivia's name was back in headlines. Jamie was contacted. So was the FBI. The letters were real. Handwriting analysis confirmed a high probability match to Olivia's past journals. Whoever was writing them wasn't pretending. Elaine kept every envelope in a wooden box beneath her bed. And every morning, she checked the mailbox before making coffee. Hope, for the first time in years, had come back to her doorstep in ink and paper. But with every letter came a heavier question. If Olivia was alive, where was she now? When Olivia disappeared, one of the first people questioned was Brian Tellman, her AP Calculus tutor. He had been 24 at the time, fresh out of college and working as a substitute math teacher. He had tutored Olivia twice a week for 3 months leading up to prom. By all accounts, their sessions were uneventful, focused, professional, quiet. But not everyone believed that. A few classmates whispered that Olivia had confided in someone about Brian. That he made her uncomfortable. That he once gave her a ride home and she didn't mention it to her parents. The police interviewed Brian the day after Olivia's disappearance. He provided an alibi. He'd been at home watching a live NBA playoff game, alone. No one could verify that. With no evidence tying him to the scene, he was eventually dropped from the suspect list. But when the yearbook resurfaced and Walter Drexler's face was identified, Brian Tellman's name came up again, this time not for what he did, but for what he failed to say. Detective Jennings uncovered a buried report, an anonymous call made to the school guidance office the day after prom, claiming that someone had seen Olivia leave the ballroom around 9:45 p.m., in the direction of the back maintenance hallway. The caller didn't leave a name. But phone records revealed it had been placed from Brian Tellman's landline. Why hadn't he mentioned that during his interview? When investigators confronted him in the present day, Brian denied remembering the call. "I don't recall that," he said. "I was probably just trying to help. Or someone else used my phone." But the damage was done. New search warrants were issued. His laptop and phone were seized. His emails from that year reviewed. One message stood out. Sent to another teacher days before prom. "I've got a weird feeling about the Elks Lodge setup. It's not secure. Anyone could sneak in." Was it just an observation? Or a warning he never followed up on? Either way, it added pressure to a growing storm. Someone had seen Olivia that night. Someone had said nothing. And someone else, maybe more than one person, was about to have their secrets dragged into the light. It started with a phone call to the local newspaper. The editor of the Fairhaven Gazette, Margaret Dole, had just finished a piece on Olivia's re-emergence in the media when a woman called in, her voice trembling. "I saw the photo. The one in the yearbook. And I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think I saw her last month." Margaret almost dismissed it. Every time a cold case flared up, the paper was flooded with false leads. But something about the caller's voice stopped her. The woman, named Gina Paulson, said she was visiting a used bookstore 2 towns over, Stockridge, Indiana, when she saw a young woman behind the register. She looked just like the missing girl. Same face. Same eyes. But older. Tired. Like she'd lived a whole life in secret. Margaret passed the tip to Detective Jennings. Jennings, skeptical but thorough, drove to Stockridge the next morning. The bookstore was nestled between a laundromat and a pawn shop, quiet, cozy, dimly lit. The clerk behind the counter wasn't Olivia. She introduced herself as Haley Barnes, 28, and provided ID. But Jennings didn't need long to see the resemblance. Same bone structure. Same hazel eyes. Same nervous smile. "Where are you from, Haley?" Jennings asked. "Grew up in Kentucky," she answered, almost too quickly. The address on her license traced back to a rural area with no birth certificate on file. No school records before the age of 11. No trace of her in any system prior to 2005. That was 2 years after Olivia vanished. Jennings left the store, then circled back an hour later with a surveillance warrant. She waited in her car for the shift change. When Haley stepped out to take out the trash, Jennings approached her again, this time with a photo of Olivia. Haley looked at it. Her hands trembled. "I've never seen her before," she whispered. But her eyes told another story. DNA was requested, but she refused. It would take weeks to pursue a legal route. But Jennings left knowing she had seen something real. Whether or not the woman was Olivia, someone knew more than they were saying. And someone had helped her raise a life. Back in Fairhaven, Elaine Hartley received another letter. This time, it wasn't handwritten. It was typed. Clean. Precise. "I saw Jamie in a photo. She still wears the necklace I gave her. Tell her I miss her. I still remember her laugh." No return address. But the postmark? Stockridge, Indiana. Was Haley Barnes Olivia Hartley? Or someone living with her secrets? In a twist that made its way from local rumor to investigative lead, a curious real estate listing caught the attention of Detective Jennings just days after her visit to Stockridge. A home in Fairhaven had gone up for sale. Not just any home, the old Drexler residence. The same house where investigators had previously found a crawlspace box filled with Olivia-related items. The property had sat vacant for over a decade, boarded up and decaying, but now, out of nowhere, it had a buyer. And not just a buyer. A cash offer. Sight unseen. The buyer's name was Melinda Carr. Public records showed she had no previous connection to Fairhaven. No family ties. No employment in the region. But a quiet dig into her financials revealed something more startling. The funds had been wired from a private account traced to a law firm in Stockridge, Indiana. Jennings contacted the realtor posing as an interested party. She requested a walkthrough. The agent was more than happy to oblige, curious herself as to why the house had suddenly become a hot topic. Inside, the house was a time capsule. Moldy, water-damaged, but still filled with remnants of another life. Old furniture. Yellowing newspapers. Peeling wallpaper with faded sunflowers. But the basement was different. It had been completely redone. Clean concrete. Fresh drywall. New lighting. No mold. No moisture. Just one thing remained unchanged. A steel door. Bolted from the outside. With no visible lock on the inside. Jennings asked the agent if the seller had disclosed any renovations. They hadn't. There were no permits filed. No contractor logs. No receipts. It was like someone had done it all in secret, and fast. Later that week, Jennings secured a warrant to search the basement. Behind the steel door, they found what appeared to be a makeshift room. Small. Sterile. White walls. A mattress. A single chair. A mirror bolted to the wall. And in the corner, a forgotten piece of paper tucked beneath a loose floorboard. A sketch of a 5-petal flower. The same flower Olivia used to draw. DNA samples were pulled from the room. Fibers. Stray hairs. Even a faint blood smear on the inside corner of the mattress. The lab results were pending, but one thing was clear. Someone had lived in that basement. And they had wanted to forget. Before we continue, take a second to push the subscription button for notifications if you find our stories interesting. Now, let's continue. Detective Jennings had learned one thing in her long career: houses held memories, even if their walls didn't talk. But sometimes they did. While waiting on lab results from the basement, Jennings decided to revisit the upstairs floor. She brought along a structural engineer and a local contractor to examine the home's newer renovations more closely. What they found sent chills through the entire team. In one of the bedrooms, behind a wall that appeared newer than the others, the contractor noticed an odd hollow sound when he tapped the drywall. He measured the dimensions of the room and cross-referenced the space on the blueprint. It was off by 4 feet. There was a gap, something that shouldn't be there. They cut into the wall. What they found was a hidden chamber, no more than 6 feet wide. No door. No window. No way out from the inside. The air was stale and heavy, like it hadn't been touched in years. Inside were a few remnants: a rotted sleeping bag, a cracked porcelain doll, a spiral notebook with missing pages, and in the corner, a set of worn ballet slippers. Jennings stood silently as the team catalogued everything. The slippers were child-sized, and though dust-covered, the initials OH were still faintly visible on the soles. Olivia Hartley. They had already suspected she'd been kept in the house. Now they knew. The notebook, though torn and fragile, still contained 2 legible pages. One had a list of tally marks, hundreds of them. The other had a short phrase written over and over. "I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm still here." Forensics would later confirm the handwriting matched the letters sent to Olivia's mother. The timeline was becoming clearer. Olivia had been taken from the prom. Hidden in this house. Then moved. Perhaps multiple times. But the bigger question remained. Was she still alive? Or had the yearbook photo been the final breadcrumb she managed to leave behind? The yearbook photo had always been haunting. But now, with the discovery of the hidden chamber and the reappearance of Olivia's flower sketches, the figure lingering in the photo's corner took on a more sinister weight. It was Jamie Linwood, Olivia's best friend, who revisited the original printout. She hadn't stopped studying it since the librarian had first brought it forward. The blurred figure in the background, facing away from the camera but partially caught in the mirror's reflection, had sparked theories, names, and deep unease. But it was something Jamie hadn't noticed before, a small insignia on the man's jacket, that shifted everything. Not just any symbol. A patch. Faded. But familiar. She dug through her old showbox of prom memorabilia. Photos. Napkins. Her ticket stub. And there it was. In one photo, snapped earlier that evening, was a teacher, Mr. Richard Malcolm. A substitute chemistry teacher who had only worked that semester. His jacket bore the same symbol. Jamie's breath caught. Mr. Malcolm had vanished from the school faculty the week after Olivia's disappearance. Everyone had assumed he left town. No one had connected him to the investigation. Until now. Jennings had his file reopened. Employment records showed a false address. A forged background check. His real name? Harold Voss. A man with a sealed juvenile record and a history of aliases. He had bounced from district to district, always as a temporary hire, always under a different name. And each time he disappeared, the schools never followed up. Facial recognition linked him to several DMV photos under different names, and one even matched a blurry photo taken at a roadside diner in Stockridge only a year prior. Jennings issued a statewide BOLO. More pieces clicked into place. The newly constructed basement had traces of building supplies purchased from a Stockridge hardware store under a cash transaction. The steel door matched a design known to be sold exclusively to medical institutions, purchased in 2004. The room behind the drywall? A prison. Harold Voss had lived among them. Hidden. Employed. Trusted. And he had watched Olivia long before that prom night. The man in the background wasn't just a detail. He was the architect of the entire nightmare. Harold Voss had slipped through cracks for decades, but now he was a marked man. Detective Jennings knew they couldn't rely on traditional methods to catch him. He was too careful, too practiced. They needed bait. They needed a trap. And they had one, Jamie Linwood. Jamie had publicly spoken about the Yearbook, the prom night, and the recent discoveries. Her social media posts about Olivia had gone viral. She was, intentionally, made the face of the renewed investigation. Jennings's team believed that if Voss was still watching, and all signs pointed to yes, he might be tempted to reach out. They created a controlled scenario. Jamie would announce a memorial event for Olivia at the Elks Lodge, 20 years to the day since prom night. The building had been condemned but was temporarily reopened for the tribute. Posters went up. Local news stations covered it. Jamie gave heartfelt interviews. Cameras were hidden in and around the building. Plainclothes officers mixed with the crowd. The night of the event, tension clung to the air. Hundreds showed up. Former classmates. Teachers. Reporters. And somewhere in the sea of faces, Jennings believed, was Harold Voss. The event unfolded like a wake. Candles lit. Stories told. Olivia's old photos looped on a screen. But then Jamie did something unplanned, at least, to everyone but the police. She held up one of Olivia's letters. This, she said into the microphone, was postmarked from Stockridge. Just 6 months ago. I believe she's still out there. And I believe someone here knows where. The room was dead silent. And then, from the back, a man stood. He was older. Gray-bearded. Dressed plainly. He clapped slowly, then turned to leave. Jennings's team moved in. He made it 15 steps before they closed in on him. The arrest was quiet, almost surreal. He didn't resist. Didn't speak. Only looked at Jamie as they cuffed him, a slow, strange smile curling across his face. "Hello, Olivia's friend," he whispered. His ID read Henry Vaughan. Another alias. But the fingerprints told the truth. Harold Voss had finally been caught. But what he revealed in interrogation would change everything again. The interrogation room was cold, sterile, and windowless. The only light came from the buzzing fluorescent overhead. Harold Voss sat at the metal table, shackled at the wrists, calm as ever. Detective Marla Jennings entered with a manila folder tucked under her arm. She said nothing at first, just watched him. Voss returned her stare with the faintest trace of a smirk. "I assume you're here to ask me about Olivia," he said. Jennings sat down. I'm here to ask you how long you kept her alive. Voss tilted his head. Alive? Such a complicated word. She opened the folder, revealing photos from the basement, the hidden room behind the drywall, the yearbook image. She laid them out one by one. This is you. This is your house. This is where you kept her. He looked down at the photos without flinching. She was gifted. Observant. I only ever wanted to protect that. Jennings's jaw tightened. You kidnapped a child. You locked her away. You forced her to disappear. And you sent her mother letters like breadcrumbs in a sick game. Voss tapped one finger on the table. She was safer with me than out there. Safer from what was coming. Jennings leaned forward. What do you mean, what was coming? Silence. She flipped to the page containing Olivia's handwriting from the notebook in the wall. I'm still here. I'm still here. Voss stared at it. For the first time, his smile faltered. She used to whisper that through the vent, he muttered. At night. I didn't let her talk during the day. But at night? I'd hear it. Like a prayer. Jennings didn't move. Where is she now? He looked up. She's gone. Gone where? I don't know. Did she escape? He nodded. One night. I left the panel loose. Maybe on purpose. Maybe I wanted her to go. Jennings narrowed her eyes. That was over a decade ago. Where did she go? She never told me. She just left a note. Said she forgave me. That she wouldn't come back, but she'd find a way to be remembered. Jennings sat back. That's why the letters started. Voss didn't answer. But the last one, she continued, was sent just weeks ago. From Starkridge. We think she was living there. Working under the name Haley Barnes. He flinched. That name means something to you? A long pause. Tell me, he said, eyes suddenly trembling, was she okay? Jennings didn't answer. She stood, gathering the photos. You're going to prison, Harold. But before you go, we're going to find her. And she's going to tell her story, every part you tried to erase. As she walked out, Voss leaned forward and whispered after her. She used to dance when she thought I wasn't watching. Jennings paused just a moment. Then slammed the door behind her. The past was no longer buried. It was coming for everyone who tried to keep it quiet. The trial of Harold Voss began with a courtroom packed to the walls. Former classmates, teachers, journalists, and Olivia's grieving family filled the benches. It wasn't just a trial, it was the unsealing of a town's long-buried truth. Prosecutor Lane Morrissey wasted no time laying out the case. Abduction, unlawful imprisonment, psychological abuse, obstruction of justice. The evidence was overwhelming. The basement. The hidden room. The yearbook photo. The letters. The DNA. But what shook the room, what brought gasps from every corner, was when the prosecution unveiled a surprise witness. Jamie Linwood stepped up to the stand. She was no longer the weeping teenager who had lost her best friend. She was composed. Fierce. And she had brought something with her. A voice recording. It was Olivia. Found on a flash drive mailed to Jamie just 1 week prior. Postmarked Starkridge. No return address. In it, Olivia spoke calmly, her voice aged and weary, but unmistakably hers. If you're hearing this, then I've decided not to run anymore. I was taken, yes. But I survived. I endured things I won't repeat here. I forgave him, not for him, but for me. Because I deserved peace. And because silence never saved anyone. The courtroom was silent. Even the judge lowered his head. Then Jamie pulled out the final page of Olivia's journal, recovered from the hidden room. Tell them I was here. Tell them I mattered. Voss showed no emotion. Not even when his sentencing was read, life in prison without parole. But for the town of Fairhaven, justice wasn't just a sentence. It was the beginning of a reckoning. It was the long overdue answer to a question asked 20 years ago on prom night. And it was the first time Olivia Hartley was truly heard. Long after the trial faded from the headlines and Harold Voss began serving his sentence, one piece of the story remained untouched, unclaimed. The house. The Drexler residence. Its listing had quietly been removed after the investigation. The real estate agent moved on. The contractor refused to return. And despite its prime location, no one in Fairhaven wanted anything to do with it. Even with price drops and renovation incentives, the house sat empty. Grass grew tall in the yard. The shutters rattled in the wind. Curious teens dared each other to approach it but rarely got farther than the sidewalk. It had become a modern-day haunted landmark. Not because of ghosts, but because of what everyone now knew had happened within those walls. One day, months after the trial, a bouquet of wildflowers appeared on the porch. No note. Just the 5-petal kind Olivia used to draw. That same week, a woman was spotted standing in front of the house around dusk. Alone. Hooded. Still. She stayed for a long time, then turned and walked away. A neighbor snapped a photo, later shared anonymously online. It wasn't clear, but it sparked a debate. Was it Olivia? Had she returned, not to stay, but to see it one last time? The town whispered about it for weeks. Offers were made to demolish the house, but no one could agree on what should be done with the land. Some said turn it into a memorial. Others wanted it erased completely. In the end, it stayed. Empty. Standing. A testament. Because sometimes, the silence of a place is louder than any voice. And sometimes, justice looks like a house no one will ever live in again. Before we continue, take a second to push the subscription button for notifications if you find our stories interesting. Now, let's continue. Elaine Hartley kept the letters in a showbox beside her bed. Over the years, they had become her most sacred possession, ink-stained fragments of hope, grief, and unanswered questions. She never stopped believing they were from Olivia, even when the handwriting changed or the tone shifted. But after the trial, something in her began to see them differently. She spread them out on her dining room table one quiet afternoon. 20 letters. All unsigned. Some written in cursive. Some typed. All postmarked from different states. She read each one aloud to herself, this time not for clues, but for meaning. It wasn't your fault. You always looked beautiful in blue. I remember the song you used to hum. They weren't just breadcrumbs, they were messages of love, connection, and longing. Each letter had referenced something only Olivia would know. But the true revelation came when Elaine flipped them over. On the backs of several letters were faint drawings. Tiny sketches of flowers, numbers, constellations. At first, they seemed random. Until she saw the pattern. When placed side by side, in a specific order, the drawings aligned into a larger image, a map. A stylized rendering of Fairhaven. At its center, marked in a small red inked X, was the old park bench by the lake where Elaine and Olivia used to feed the ducks. The next morning, Elaine walked to the bench. And there, tucked beneath it, wrapped in a weatherproof pouch, was a single Polaroid. It was Olivia. Older. Smiling. Standing beside a bookstore shelf. Behind her, a sign, New Beginnings. On the back of the photo, one line. You gave me the strength to become my own rescue. Elaine wept, but not from pain. For the first time in 2 decades, the letters had done what they were always meant to do. They brought her daughter home. Not in person, but in truth. And that was enough. The town of Fairhaven thought the story had reached its end. Justice served. Closure granted. Olivia's ghost, they believed, had finally been laid to rest. But then came the interview. It aired quietly, during a late-night segment on a public access channel in upstate New York. A soft-spoken bookstore owner named Haley Barnes agreed to sit down with a local journalist for a special on healing from trauma. The segment was meant to highlight small-town resilience. It became something else entirely. Because Haley Barnes was Olivia Hartley. Older. Measured. But unmistakably her. She didn't call it a confession. She called it a reckoning. In the interview, she spoke without bitterness. No names. No dates. Just truth. When someone takes your voice, the only way to survive is to find another way to speak. She talked about rebuilding her identity. About choosing anonymity not from fear, but from freedom. I didn't want to be defined by what was done to me. I wanted to define myself. She shared how she sent the letters to her mother not for answers, but to offer her peace. Each one a puzzle piece she hoped Elaine would understand when the time was right. But what struck viewers most was her final message. There are others like me. Girls who vanished. Girls who were told to stay quiet. I want them to know that survival isn't the end, it's the beginning. The interview rippled across the country. It was uploaded. Shared. Cited by advocacy groups. Olivia, Haley, became a quiet symbol of resilience. Not because she told the world everything that happened. But because she chose what to say. And in that choice, she reclaimed her story. On a quiet street in Catskill, New York, nestled between a bakery and a thrift store, sat a modest bookstore with a hand-painted sign, New Beginnings. It wasn't just a store. It was a sanctuary. Locals loved the place for its handwritten recommendations, its creaky wooden floors, and the woman who always seemed to know exactly which book someone needed, even when they didn't. Haley Barnes. She rarely spoke about herself, never showed up in town council meetings, and kept her past out of arm's reach. But she remembered every face that walked through her door. Especially the ones looking for something they couldn't name. After the interview aired, the bookstore saw a surge of visitors. Survivors. Strangers. Women who brought their daughters just to meet her. Journalists tried to sneak in with hidden cameras. She declined every follow-up request. Except one. A girl named Riley drove 4 hours with nothing but a notebook in her hands. Her sister had disappeared 6 years earlier. Cold case. No leads. Riley didn't ask Haley to solve it. She just wanted to know if it was possible to survive something like that. Haley offered her tea. Sat her down. And pulled a book from the shelf, The Diary of Anne Frank. She opened to a page, pointed, and read aloud. I still believe, in spite of everything, that people are truly good at heart. She didn't say more. She didn't need to. Riley cried for the first time in months. And when she left with something more than a book. She left with the understanding that some pain doesn't vanish. It just gets folded into who we become. Later that evening, after closing, Haley stood at the front window. She looked out at the street bathed in the golden hue of a fading sun. Her reflection in the glass was faint but whole. She placed one hand against it. The town of Fairhaven no longer haunted her. It lived behind her now, like the pages of a book already read. But she would always remember the window she once dreamed of, the one that finally opened. Jamie Linwood stood behind the counter of the Fairhaven Historical Society, adjusting a display case filled with photos from the class of 2003. It was quiet, as usual. Outside, fall leaves rustled along the sidewalk. She nearly missed the sound of the bell above the door. But then she looked up. A woman stepped in, tall, soft-spoken, with long dark hair tucked into a scarf. Her eyes scanned the room carefully. Eyes that once filled yearbooks and memories. Eyes Jamie hadn't seen in 20 years. Olivia. Jamie whispered. The woman smiled faintly. Hi, Jamie. They stood frozen, both of them unsure whether to cry or laugh. Eventually, they did both. They sat in the back room, old photographs spread out between them. Olivia, now Haley again, traced her fingers across faces she hadn't seen since the night she vanished. I came because I needed to see it, she said. Not just the place, but the people who remembered. Jamie nodded. We never stopped. Olivia reached into her coat and pulled out a notebook, worn, faded. This was the journal I kept during those years. Some of it's painful. But some of it kept me alive. Jamie opened to the first page. In Olivia's handwriting. If I survive, it will be because someone believed I was worth looking for. They talked for hours. About the past. The future. The possibility of healing without forgetting. Olivia didn't promise to stay, and Jamie didn't ask her to. They both understood this visit wasn't a return. It was a reckoning. Before she left, Olivia placed the journal in Jamie's hands. For the archive, she said. Then she stepped back into the golden light, her figure framed by the doorway of a town that had once mourned her like a ghost. But she was no ghost. She was a survivor. And this time, she chose how the story would end. 2 years after the trial, the Fairhaven Town Council approved a quiet, unanimous resolution. The old Eastfield Library, shuttered and vacant for over a decade, would be transformed. Not into a cafe. Not into condos. Into a museum. The Museum of the Missing. Curated by Jamie Linwood and funded by community donations and silent benefactors, it was dedicated not just to Olivia Hartley, but to every person who vanished without a trace, and every family left behind to wait, hope, and wonder. The exhibits were simple but piercing. Display cases of yearbooks, old photos, handwritten notes, newspaper clippings, and timelines marked with question marks. One wall was covered in letters, copies of real messages sent to missing persons over the years. Messages never answered, but never forgotten. In the center of the museum stood Olivia's journal, encased in glass. Beside it, a plaque. For every voice that was silenced. And every one that found its way back. Visitors came from across the country. Families looking for solace. Students writing reports. Survivors needing to see themselves reflected in something other than tragedy. And tucked in the corner, beneath soft lighting, was a photo of Olivia, smiling, standing in front of the bookstore window in Catskill. She never attended the opening. But 1 week later, a staff member found a bouquet of 5-petal wildflowers on the museum steps. No card. Just the petals. They were placed in a small vase beside her journal. In that quiet building, memory was no longer a weight. It was a promise. The class of 2003 had buried their time capsule behind the old Fairhaven Gymnasium just weeks before prom. A silly tradition. Letters to future selves. Disposable cameras. Mixtapes. Predictions about careers and marriages. Most had forgotten what they even wrote. 2 decades later, the new principal, Ms. Garcia, decided to dig it up as part of a homecoming celebration. A small ceremony was organized. Alumni were invited. Olivia's name was mentioned quietly, respectfully. When the rusted container was opened, laughter echoed through the schoolyard. A cassette tape labeled Best Dance Moves, a CD mix from Jamie Linwood, a note predicting hover cars by 2015. And then, a plain envelope. No name. No return address. No postmark. Just the word, for when the silence ends. Inside was a letter, written in familiar, slanted handwriting. It began. If you're reading this, it means I made it. Somehow. The letter was from Olivia. She had slipped it into the capsule herself, unnoticed, sometime between final exams and that fateful night. In it, she spoke to her classmates, to her town, and to her future. I don't know where I'll be. But I hope I've grown into someone who can live without hiding. Someone who speaks, even when it's hard. She forgave those who turned away. She thanked those who never stopped looking. And she reminded everyone that silence is never neutral, it's a decision. The letter was read aloud during the ceremony. No one moved. No one breathed. When it ended, the entire gathering stood in applause, not out of celebration, but recognition. A single letter, sealed for 20 years, had become the final chapter no one expected. The past wasn't buried after all. It had been waiting. To be opened. To be heard. And to remind everyone what it meant to truly remember. In the newly renovated Fairhaven High Auditorium, a bronze plaque was installed near the main entrance. It wasn't flashy. Just a smooth metal rectangle with a quiet inscription. To those who disappeared, and those who never stopped looking. Below it were 24 names. Some were students. Some were runaways. Some had been missing for years before Olivia ever vanished. But now, they were no longer a list of cases. They were people. Olivia's story didn't just reopen an investigation. It reopened hearts, minds, and long-closed files. Her bravery gave voice to others. And in doing so, it reshaped how the town of Fairhaven treated its forgotten. Posters began appearing in grocery stores and bus stops, not just of missing persons, but of survivors telling their stories. Schools incorporated Awareness Week into the curriculum. And the local police department assigned a permanent liaison to cold cases, ensuring that no disappearance was ever again treated as a footnote. At the dedication ceremony, Jamie Linwood read the names on the plaque aloud. One by one. And when she finished, she added one more. Olivia Hartley, found, but never lost. There was no applause. Just silence. The good kind. The kind that means someone is listening. And in that moment, Olivia's story wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever waited by a phone that didn't ring. To everyone who had searched in shadows. To everyone who had believed, even when belief felt foolish. The names on that plaque would never fade. Because remembering them, saying them, was how the world promised it would never let them vanish again. If you enjoyed this episode of Chase Narrations, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your support helps us continue to share impactful and meaningful content.